Hi, boys and girls, it's Miss Galino, and today we're going to be focusing on working on our historical writing piece. And the other day, we began by generating some ideas, thinking about different historical time periods. And today, what we're going to do is actually start the planning. So, what you need to do is make sure that you have your writer's notebook and make sure that you have open the section where you created some lists of different historical time periods. And also, we kind of jotted a little bit about possible characters or a possible setting, maybe some problems within our story. So, what you're going to have to do is decide which historical time period do I know best and that I want to research, because that's what you're going to have to do throughout this unit is almost become like an expert at that historical time period. So choose wisely. So, writers, you're going to use what you generated from the other day to plan real or imagined experiences or events for your historical fiction writing piece. And the way we're going to do that is by using either a story arc or a story timeline. You could create your own table. And you just have to make sure that you always, as writers, you always focus on the setting, your characters, the problem, and the resolution. So this is pretty cool. What we're going to ask you to do is to watch this, and it's from Pixar. And these are actual writers that describe how they begin to plan out their story, just like you're going to be doing. And believe it or not, when writers create these types of stories and movies, they always start with planning first. So there's no way you can just start typing your story. You have to plan it out. And we want you to watch in the way in which these Pixar writers decide to plan before they actually get to the writing process, which is like the drafting. So take a look, and when you're done with that, come back to me. All right, so pretty cool that this is a real life skill. And the way in which these writers create these wonderful movies is by planning first. And that's what you're going to be doing. So the next few slides are going to be examples of different strategies, different writing strategies that you're going to use. Now, you only have to pick one, only one. So one example that some writers use are called story mountains. And it's exactly what it looks like. You create a mountain and you start jotting down how you'd like your story to open. So you're going to describe the setting and introduce the characters. Then you're going to have some build up, which is excitement and tension. And you start thinking about how the characters are feeling. And then you go to the climax, which is they call it the major dilemma in here. And that's like the best part of any book you've ever read. You're like, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh. Or a movie or a story you read, anything. There's always going to be the climax where you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to this character? So you want to think about that in your planning. Then you want to bounce back down the mountain gently, and you want to come up with some type of resolution. So characters find a route through like their problem. And then happily ever after, you're ending. So you do want to make sure that you have some sort of ending and closure, and something that the reader who's going to read your story or maybe watch your movie one day, that they're going to be different because of your story. You taught them something. That's another example of a story mountain. So if you're not interested in the story mountain, you could choose then a story timeline. And this is good for any writers who tend to want to have more of a structure. You can use this, what happened first, and then what, and then your climax in the middle, and then slowly going to an end. Or a story arc, and that's pretty common. I'm sure everybody has heard of a story arc. You also want to keep in mind, though, for whichever one you decide, your setting, your character or characters, I actually should put an S there, and the same thing with the problem. Your end settings, you could actually have multiple settings, multiple characters, multiple problems, and you really should have one resolution now. So you should definitely have a table that will be very helpful. So you could do like the mountain, the story mountain, and then just have this little table in your notebook. So you're going to click on there, and this is going to just give you a little bit of some more information about actual definitions and some examples. So if like you take a look here, this writer decided to use bullets. Oh, actually bullets too are awesome. And here's an example of, it looks like it was the Great Depression. And here's some examples of the problem, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, the resolution, and the theme. Don't worry about the theme so much. We'll go back to that later. But this is a great example of what you're going to possibly produce, unless you're going to do the story arc, which you're going to then get your notebook and you're going to draw your story arc, or the storyboard, or bullets, or that story mountain. So really anything that you find comfortable. There's so many different words and so many different styles of planning. It really depends on you as a writer. So you're only going to produce one now. One. For me, I'm probably going to use that story mountain. I like that mountain. And then with that story mountain, though, I'm going to have that block that I colored in for you. There it is. I'm going to have this too. So in my notebook, I'm going to have the mountain, and then I'm going to have like little boxes underneath it that will give me a little bit more structure in terms of the setting, the character, the problem, the resolution. Here's an example really quickly if you want to see. This is the drafting part. So I don't know if you want to look at that or not yet, but that's an example of us drafting. But we don't start that. Just like the Pixar writers, they don't just start drafting. They do the planning first. So here's your to-do list, and I'm going to make it nice and big for you to see. Here's your list for today. So you're going to look at your notes that you already wrote, and some of you actually said you were working on it yesterday. You're going to decide on which historical writing time period is most interesting to you. You're going to pick the one. Then you're going to use a strategy, one strategy, and you're going to start planning out your story. And remember, last but not least, that you're just planning. You can always add or change your idea. So if you start with planning and you start with the story arc, and you're starting to think that maybe you should go to the story timeline instead, that's fine. Don't cross out anything in your writer's notebook, because this is where you're safe in here. Whatever's in here is safe. So I don't want you to cross anything out. You could try a story arc, and if you're not feeling too comfortable with that, then try one of the other strategies that are in this PowerPoint. So good luck, and we're looking forward to seeing it when we see you next. So get started. Happy writing. And you may, those people who are really interested, you may want to start looking, hint, hint, online for different articles about your historical time period.